Good morning. It is Friday, March 11th. Welcome to the Morning Medical Update. I'm Alexis Del Cid in for Jess Lovell this morning. Thank you for joining us here on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. It is a sports fan's most favorite time of the year. We're talking about March Madness, but if you pay attention to Twitter, Facebook, or any of the news, you also know it's the season for vasectomies. Men being able to stay at home and rest while watching all the games. Today, Dr. Ajay Nangia, a professor of urology at the University of Kansas Health System, joins us to talk about that. And with the mask mandates at airports and on planes set to expire soon, how do you keep players COVID-free? Dr. Harrell, a primary care team physician and Kansas Team Health member, tells us how that's possible. I want to give you a look at today's top medical headlines. Earlier menopause appears to be associated with a higher risk of dementia and the onset of dementia. Chinese researchers say it's because estrogen plays a big role in brain function. And for women who are 50 and younger, that could lead to brain changes related to neurodegenerative disease and speed up the process of dementia. And here's another reason to ditch those drinks with high amounts of fructose. It could cause you to suffer from fatty liver disease. A new study in the journal Molecular Nutrition and Food Research finds that eating a high-fat diet, mixing with those highly concentrated drinks, increases the amount of fat in your liver. Researchers say that fat then travels to your heart, causing a number of cardiovascular issues as well. And you know what could be the key to living longer? Optimism. Researchers at Mizzou found that children and teens who are positive in their thinking are less likely to develop heart disease as adults. They found eating healthy and keeping negative thoughts at bay help teenagers to live a good lifestyle well into their older years. So make sure you get your questions into us on Facebook, YouTube, and the Medical News Network. You can find those links right here on your screen. We want to welcome Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control, with our newest COVID numbers. Good morning, Dr. Hawkinson.
Hi, how's it going?
Doing all right.
Yeah, I think we're doing all right here too at the health system. Only 13 active infections, 1 in the ICU, none on the ventilator, and 64 in that recovery period. So total of 77, but we continue to see those active infections continue to drop, and I think we are all happy about that.
Boy, that's good news. Yeah. Want to check in and see if we have any reporters on the line today with questions? We do have a question. No question. All right, we'll keep them coming. If you have them, you can email them us. We will ask those questions on all of our morning updates. Now to our big topic today. You've heard March is the busiest month of the year for vasectomies. We're going to talk to one medical expert here at the health system that actually says that's not the case here. Approximately 500,000 men in the U.S. get vasectomies every year. A large percent of them do schedule them for the beginning of March, so you may find it hard to get an appointment this month. And the reason behind it might be basketball. Want to turn to our guests. We have Dr. Ajay Nangia and Dr. Harrell. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
I want to start with Dr. Nangia. So that number sounds very high. You say you get asked this question every year. As a reporter, I feel like I did this story about once a year, no matter what city I worked in. Right. Is it true here?
No, it's not true, and here's the story.
Okay.
So going back to around about 2010, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, actually a former trainee of mine on the East Coast started his practice in Cape Cod. And he thought, great idea, pizza and a vasectomy.
Right.
Funny how that connection happened.
Pair nicely.
Yep. And he said, well, we'll do it in March, during March Madness. Next thing you know, social media took off. Right. Anderson Cooper on CNN reported it. So then all of a sudden, copycats, urban legend.
Right. Next
thing you know, one of my dear friends in Washington, he wrote a paper about that question. And actually, there is a new a blip up during March. The highest numbers are actually in October, November, and December for very practical reasons. Men have often met their deductibles for their insurance.
Okay, so, that makes more sense.
Yeah, it's financial. If you really think you want to do a vasectomy in March and sit on your keister for about a week,
watch basketball.
Yeah, and get your honeydews, put aside by your partner and anything. Right. Good, take advantage of it. And actually, I have not found that to happen, that increase in March. People talk to me about it, and many times I'm booked out 3 months. So you have to plan ahead, just like you said.
Right.
And from the Masters to other games. But for this particular period where there are games virtually every weekday, take it.
take it. You would recommend it. It would be a good time if you can book it out far enough.
If they can book it out far enough, I do get a few number but other institutions have found people specifically asking for that.
I read somewhere, and this might be again the case of the tail wagging the dog, as you were describing. I read that in some cities they call it the Vasters, because guys plan it around golf. But you're saying this is just
the very first one I had on TV was a dear friend of mine who had it done because of the Masters.
Okay.
And he made one of the local TV stations, and we still talk about it today.
So it was good planning on his part.
Good planning on his part.
I want to talk to you about the process, because a lot of men get squeamish when this topic comes up. Is it a painful process? And we're talking to men who might be considering a vasectomy but haven't pulled the trigger yet, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question. And again, men are like deer in headlights sometimes when it comes to that part of the body, understandably. I always argue that women are more stoic and tolerate a lot more than men ever do. But injection is involved. There's a very small needle, so you can't say the word needle and that area down there in the same sentence without people like freaking out. So that's why they get the Valium.
Okay, and that's my next question. How do you calm that man down when he comes into your office for this procedure?
It's music in the background, my calming voice, rubbing their belly just like their mamas, and giving them a very deliberate breathing exercises actually to kind of calm them down while I give them the local anesthetic. And I won't say everybody, but a lot of the guys at the end do say, that was better than I expected.
Right.
Because men are mean to each other. They're all kind of making it.
They're brutal.
Brutal.
Because we all hear our husbands or our partners talking to each other on the phone after the process or before the process, and there's no mercy there.
There's no mercy. Not from the female partners either.
Right.
We had the babies.
Why is that?
Right.
Oh, that's
we
true.
had the babies.
Yeah. Okay.
You can take one for the team.
You can handle that.
Yeah, take one for the team.
Has the process changed during COVID?
When we had the really big shutdown, March of 2020 for 3 months, and so everything shut down, our practices shut down. And then it built up again, and really hasn't really. Omicron and Delta has really hurt us, though, because just like Hawkeye told you about the numbers, how bad it got.
Right.
I mean, our outpatients were also getting COVID, symptomatic, asymptomatic, not needing to numbers. But I had many cancellations because of COVID. Actually, patients having COVID and being honest about their symptoms.
Have those numbers come back up now?
Yeah,
as the numbers that Dr. Hawkinson says are going down?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're not hearing everyone. Even my kids who had been vaccinated got COVID after it. So, that was a real deal. I mean, it has been a real deal, as we know, and we're trying to tell everybody that it really is a big deal. And our numbers were being affected in clinic, no doubt about it.
Vasectomies aren't immediate as far as their effectiveness. There's always one story in every friend group of someone who got a vasectomy and didn't follow the rules, and whoops, they have a surprise, 9 months later. So what are the rules after a vasectomy? How soon is it effective?
Right. That's a very good question, actually. So men are very deliberately instructed that they must continue birth control for 3 months and a minimum 20 ejaculations to then get their analysis. At that point, 98% of men are sort of cleared, meaning under 100,000 non-moving sperm. I go one step further generally, and I'm really OCD about making that very low number. But needless to say that has happened in my practice 4 times when guys have not
followed the rules.
And I think it may be higher because only 50% of men get their checkups, and some of them don't follow the rules. And I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm beyond the point where I can lead them into the clinic to do their specimen. I'm like, some personal responsibility does have to happen.
And as long as you've gone through the process of having this procedure, you might as well make sure it works.
I mean, we're talking about sporting analogies. I call it falling at the last hurdle.
Right.
Right?
That's a good one.
Yeah,
yes.
all the time. I mean, guys get these analogies. I hate to use metaphors like that, but they do. And I don't know how to spell it. We do this procedure for them.
Is there an age limit? And I'm asking this, do you ever say you're too young? I don't want to perform this vasectomy.
Well, that gets into very difficult ethical and moral questions. I mean, I have been asked by 18-year-olds. I won't do that. That's my personal decision.
So is it up to each doctor's personal decision?
It really is. I mean, they may be of legal age to have their own health care, but I truly struggle with that. Now, that is a moral decision, I guess, as opposed to an ethical decision. And I think because I'm a dad, I
Right.
try to counsel them. You have to figure out if there's any psychological issues. Unfortunately, sometimes it's abuse. There may be some deep psychological problems. I've had college students at 21 come in thinking that may be a little bit earlier and easier. And there's an interesting statistic. If men have their vasectomy done under the age of 30, there's a 12.5 times higher chance that they'll want it reversed
Really?
than if they had their vasectomy after the age of 30.
Is the reversal process involved? Can you explain how that works?
Yep, it is involved for two reasons. One, it's longer. We do it in the operating room. It's about 3.5 hours surgery, doing microsurgery. Unfortunately, it's quite expensive because it's usually out of pocket. And recovery is about the same. But certainly, it's a conscious decision. It's almost aesthetic, as they call it. I mean, it's like
Right.
plastic surgery. If you opt to have a vasectomy, you don't get it covered for generally by insurance. And therefore out of pocket. And you have to think very long and hard about why. Another kid, another partner, so very extensive discussion about options. Not doing anything to doing a vasectomy reversal or doing in vitro fertilization with what we call sperm recovery,
Right.
to obviously other things, adoption, donor sperm, foster care. And more importantly, the biggest question is, why do you want to do it? I'm not judgmental. But as a doctor, I feel like I'm a counselor to
Sure.
probe those questions, just like vasectomy.
Yeah.
Why? And I have many men coming in without having had children for vasectomy, right? And I'm like Dad. I've always seen the people on the other side of the fence who come back
Sure.
with a new partner or a partner and say, well, I kind of made a mistake a few years ago.
And then you talk them through that
Talk them
and
through that.
set them up.
You
So
know?
you try to figure it out on the front end so someone doesn't have to
That's
come
right.
back and get that reversal.
That's right.
I want to talk about something else in addition to medical procedures. There's another hot topic during March Madness. It's the upcoming changes with mask mandates. And this is where we want to bring in Dr. Harrell. With the CDC easing face mask guidelines and with masks soon going away on planes and in the airport, how on earth do you keep players free from COVID and other viruses?
Yeah, it's a challenge. So I think the most important thing we do is just educate on what that risk still is. Currently the NCAA attestation form for each team still states that they have to wear a mask on an airplane and while in the airport. So, we've kind of got that on our side. If they elect to reverse that, that would be something we'll deal with. I think, certainly from our standpoint, our coaching staff and administration understand how important this time of year is and where we need to try to mitigate some of those risks. So again, I think it's education. Right now we have that NCAA attestation form that says if they're not compliant with those rules, and there's a number of those, including pre-arrival testing and things like that there's forfeiture of games. So we've got a pretty good support system in making sure that we keep our players as safe as we can.
When it comes to the tournament as a whole, can you talk us through some of the other steps being taken to make sure that the tournament itself isn't affected like it was 2 years ago?
Yeah, so there's several layers on that attestation form and kind of some of the potential mitigation strategies. So one is, there is some masking strategies in some of the higher risk scenarios, including the airport. There is testing to be done either 24 or 48 hours prior to arrival to the site, which is dependent on your vaccination status. So if any member obviously is tested positive, they're excluded from that travel group. And then there's some contact tracing that goes on there as well. We've been very strong in recommendations, the NCAA guidelines on that, as far as really what sort of activities you should be doing outside of that travel party or the tier 1 individuals that have been in that test group and avoiding any of those exposures outside of that. And so again, there's really just a lot of time talking about the fact that the risk isn't zero. This is obviously almost an awkward time for a lot of us. We've been living this for a couple years and we've kind of gotten used to certain things and there's a lot of questions as to why now? And so we have to be very consistent and empathetic to some of those questions, because they really can be all over the board, but they're excellent questions and concerns. And so again, we just talk about doing everything we can to limit that, and then it's kind of up to them to make good decisions.
And that's a good point, Doctor. It's not like you're barred from wearing a mask. If you want to wear a mask in the airport or on planes, people, I would imagine, moving forward over the years, there are people who will continue to wear masks every time they fly or in the airport. When you talk to the fans, are there specific things that fans should know when they head to the tournament that they need to do, or any changes to the tournament that fans need to know about?
Well, yeah, it's really interesting, actually, again, on that with the NCAA attestation form, and maybe just to go into a little more detail on that. So each organization or school that is chosen on selection Sunday here will have to sign a form that says they've read it, that they comply with all of the directives in that. And if they're found to violate any one of those, will be eliminated from the tournament. So it's big stakes for each school and university. But there's also a third component to that, which is each site has their own recommendations that are based on the host city. And so there are several cities on there that have much different requirements for fans than others. And so I suppose the right answer is, got to know where you're going. If you're going to travel, with our team, you got to know where we're going and what those requirements are. And some of those requirements, are that you have to have a test in order to come into the stands, or provide documentation of vaccine status. So some sites are requiring masks. So again, we're all excited, but add that to your travel considerations if you're gonna follow us as we advance, to know where we're going and what those requirements are.
Do your homework ahead of time, and that's something that we're all going to have to get used to. Is just reading up a little more wherever we're headed, whatever we're doing, figure out the rules, what we need to do, so that we can enjoy these things. Do you have a concern, Doctor, that this year's tournament could become a super spreader, even with COVID cases not running as rampant as they were 1 or 2 years ago?
Oh, sure. There's always concern, right? When we're packing this many people in small areas, and I think this is part of really one of our first exposure experiences to life that's going to be different, where we know that this exists and is more in that endemic component. So I mean, it's always a risk, because it's going to happen. Somebody's going to be positive, and there's going to be some exposure concerns, and I think realistically that's just what life is going to be like moving forward for some time.
We have some questions from our community that we want to get in. We have a question from Isaac. Isaac has this question for our urologist. A question for our urologist guest: how long can someone safely hold it? Sometimes on a long trip or during a movie, I'm worried my bladder will burst. We always tell our kids not to hold it, because I feel like someone told me a long time ago when I was a kid that was bad to do. Is there a safe way to hold it, or you should just go and you go?
Well, there's the I really need to go and I cannot and I'm going to pee my pants kind of level, which your body will take care of it. But you're right, there is some voluntary control. If you're just not in the right place to go to the bathroom, then you can hold it to a certain degree. But it really isn't good to do. I mean, not because of urine infections, but your bladder. If you keep doing it long enough, you get dysfunctional voiding. It's what we call it in the trade.
And then I heard Dr. Hawkinson nodding and going. Did you have
UTIs.
Experience treating people with this? Or
I mean, we treat people all the time, and we work very closely with our urology colleagues to help with this. And I think you can also get reflux backup through the.
In children,
what's reflux backup?
So if you have a full bladder with a high pressure, then there's usually a valve system that controls the way the urine flows, but you'll break that method and it'll go up to the kidneys.
Oh, man. And then what
Then
happens?
they can get
You're in
infections, and their kidneys can be a problem.
That sounds rough.
That can be chronic voiding dysfunction that can cause that, absolutely. And Dana sees this all the time for people that we see with recurrent UTIs or have bladder stones or dysfunctional spina bifida, multiple sclerosis, people who have voiding dysfunction for non-voluntary reasons.
Right.
But you can actually teach yourself to be a dysfunctional voider, hence children.
Oh.
And pooping too, by the way.
Right.
If you're a
Yeah.
poor pooper, you become a poor peer.
Oh, yes. And we always, these are conversations you have with your littles when, you have toddlers and you're potty training them. I have a question from Jean. Dr. Nangia, Jean wants to know, what are the problems giving vasectomies to the clinically obese? Are there problems with that?
Well, it's a technical challenge.
Okay.
It can be difficult to feel the vas deferens, that's the name of the tube or sperm duct. And those, when I see them in consultation, many times I do the physical exam, and if I have trouble feeling it there, it's probably going to be trouble doing it under local. And once in a while, I do have to do the vasectomy. There's a lot of adipose fat tissue down there, or just difficult to feel to be accurate, so I'll take them to the operating room once in a while.
Question from Steve. Steve would like to know if a married man needs his wife's permission to have a vasectomy.
No.
Okay.
The bottom line there, and you can weave all the wicked webs you want to do and not tell your wife, good luck to you. But, or, for other reasons, sometimes they have mistresses. And that sounds very weird and Dr. Phil-like, but I hate to tell you that's the world I live in. That
Do patients confess that to you?
No, but I will ask, are you doing this as a consensual experience with your partner? And they'll go, no, I'm doing this by myself. And then I give them the daddy talk. I give them are you sure? It's okay. You're my patient.
Right.
It's your prerogative to do this. But then I always ask the elephant in the room question, why aren't you telling your partner?
Right.
Once in a while, they'll kind of squeam on their chair and they'll tell you. And
Right.
sometimes they're blatant. And I'm like, listen, I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you that this is a decision that you're making for all of the reasons, with or without telling your partner.
We have a question from a few women, different kinds of questions, but along the same lines when it comes to women's health. And I know that Dr. Nangia, leaky bladder is an issue that you're well versed in for women's health. So I want to ask you about that first. What is it that women need to know about this? Is it leaky bladder syndrome? Is that what it's called?
Well, we call it incontinence, obviously in the proper words, but the question is it stress incontinence I call it sneeze and peas. If you sneeze or you move a certain way and you leak, is that often postmenopausal? Is it because you've had babies, big babies especially? Is it just the muscles not as tight and you can do pelvic floor exercises? Is it neurogenic bladder, where what we call overflow incontinence, which is sometimes when your bladder is full, women
Right.
don't have as much control, hence the Kegel exercises they do after babies, for example, and they just leak out because their bladder's too full.
How do you know when it's time to see a doctor for that? Because it feels like after the age of 45, everyone I know has to cross their legs when they sneeze. Right?
Yeah.
Is that does everybody need to be seeing a doctor for this, or is that just part of life as a woman that you just live with?
That's a very good question. I think the real question is, A, how much is it bothering the woman to need to be open enough to go and see a doctor and open up about their embarrassing situation. Number two, and Dr. Hawkinson and I again deal with this, recurrent UTIs. Is there something else that's causing those leaky bladders to lead to infections? And therefore, that's when we try to investigate how the bladder squeezes and works and any interventions that are needed.
And Dr. Hawkinson, what are you experiencing with your patients with that?
It's mostly what they experience, and it's just, it's a horrible quality of life. They get antibiotics, typically they feel better, and then soon after that they start to have symptoms again. So it's really more of a matter of quality of life for them, and we really try to figure out exactly what's going on. It's not just simple cystitis or simple UTI that we talk about, but there are complex physical differences and physical changes and just other complex issues that go along into creating this recurrent type of cycle with infections or symptoms or both, actually.
Question for Dr. Harrell. I want to bring Dr. Harrell in. I know we're asking a lot of questions about, vasectomies and women's health. But there is a question that I have gotten from a couple people is how soon after you get a vasectomy are you allowed to play the sport that you love? And would an athlete be allowed to get a vasectomy around tournament time, or is that no? You got to wait till after the tournament. I know these are young guys, so these are very young guys, but it is a question tied into sports.
Yeah, so that would be the discussion with oral and with the moral and ethic discussion. But I guess the way I would advise for as far as tournament time goes, and I wouldn't do an elective procedure like that in season. Although our good doctors here are excellent at preventing complications. They're not zero, and so that would not be something I would advise
for any sport.
Yeah, I think if somebody's in the middle of competition season and they're not willing to take a small break from training and competition, that may not be the best time to consider a vasectomy.
I have some more questions coming in.
And actually, if I could comment.
Please do, yeah.
So, exactly. I mean, definitely not in tournament season for an elective. And I've looked after MLB and NFL players who wanted a vasectomy off-season. Naturally.
Off-season,
I mean, they've got a
on-season.
career to look after, right?
Right.
And it's not just the usual 1 or 2 weeks we tell the guys, and I tell them they have to be able to do jumping jacks before they go do any physical exercise. But professional and very high competitive athletes are going to possibly take a knee, an elbow, a ball, and they have to be full on, right? 120% when they're playing without pain. And so definitely not during season. Training can be affected, exactly. I agree with Dr. Harrell completely. They have to be completely pain-free, and not even in that short first month period. I want them to be jumping jack free.
Right,
Yeah.
jumping jack free.
Yeah,
Certainly not getting tackled.
definitely not getting tackled.
Or leaping for
That's right. The
slam
elbow
dunks
in
or
basketball, oh my God.
right. You don't want an elbow in your.
Ooh.
Hopefully, no one's tackling anyone in basketball. Ashley Nicole has a question. This is an interesting one. Ashley writes, "Why do I keep hearing that young women who want to be sterilized are being denied? Is there a rule in place that prevents women from making this decision?"
So that's a bit tricky. Not
Okay.
because young girls, women, adolescents are able to get reversible contraceptive without parental consent, which is
Birth
again,
control pills.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about? Birth
but when we
control
talk
patch?
about
Yeah.
again female sterilization or tubal ligation, they have to be of legal age. And the same question that you asked me: when would a gynecologist do a tubal ligation, which is
Right.
invasive? You have to go to the operating room for that. That one has to be based on those same decision making that I mentioned about vasectomy. The reasons why, again, has there been anything else that they're concerned about? Being pregnant, obviously. So that's a complicated question. That being denied may not be the right word. I can't speak to the gynecological guidelines
Sure.
because I'm not a gynecologist. But that is an interesting question, just like it is on the male side.
Isaac Presley has a question for Dr. Harrell. And Dr. Hawkinson, maybe you can weigh on this. When it comes to indoor spaces, does ceiling height make a difference as far as transmission dynamics? I'm sure it does because cases across the nation have plummeted, even as basketball arenas across the country have hosted full and often unmasked crowds for months. Arenas, of course, are big rooms with high ceilings. That's a great question. Let's toss it to Dr. Harrell first.
Yeah, it is part of the equation and kind of what you look at when you're talking about airflow and adequate ventilation in a room. So certainly, we do a lot of different things. If we can open the windows in our arenas or our indoor practice facilities, we do that every time we have a chance. We get the air moving with large fans. Certainly, the size of the room, the height of the ceiling. The bigger, the more open, the more air we get moving through it, the safer we consider that.
Dr. Hawkinson, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Dr. Harrell said is completely right. It is one part of the equation, but everything else he said is correct too. It just is a combination of those factors.
So then I have a question. So if arenas, with the bigger airflow, then what about, let's just say, a small hardware store versus a giant big box Lowe's hardware store? Would the big one big stores and those warehouses be safer than others, or are we taking this too far with that?
I mean, I think you have to consider how many people are in that space, how long are you staying in that space, are you moving in and out? You know, it's certainly different than sitting in a certain spot for 2 or 2.5 hours to watch an event. So I think there's just
Right.
differences there inherently.
Emily has a question about kidney infections. Dr. Nangia, what causes a kidney infection? Is a kidney infection caused by that backup or lack of voiding?
Wow, this really might be. I'm going to pass this over to Dana in a minute, but
Okay.
yes, it could be an ascending infection, usually starting with a cystitis or bladder infection, and then it extends up to the kidneys. It can actually be even more serious. It could be through the blood, and it could be
Oh,
another
okay.
infection that cause, it could be a wound, and then it gets into the blood and gets
Into the
septicemia, and it goes
kidneys.
to the kidneys. It could be kidney stones.
Uh-huh.
They can be infected kidney stones. They could be a blockage and then have some bacteria behind the stone, and that can lead to kidney infections. It can be honeymoon cystitis, and then that goes up to the kidneys. And sometimes
And what's honeymoon cystitis?
it's after sex.
And just honeymoon because it's
That's just
A
the
lot.
kind of the
Yeah.
euphemism for
Yeah.
after sex.
Mhm.
Not necessarily every honeymoon. Don't let
well,
me get that
hopefully
wrong.
not.
No, I hope
That would
not.
be a bad
That
honeymoon.
would, but
Yeah.
especially early on,
Honeymoons.
and sometimes postmenopausal, it can be kind of sort of a, dare I call it, a honeymoon cystitis. But yes, it's multifactorial. Immunosuppression. So if they've had any long-standing suppression with medications or diseases, diabetes, sweet urine, so to speak.
Is it
stuff like
true that if you drink too much tea, you can get kidney stones? I feel like in college we heard that. Is that true?
It is, and
Okay.
but there's like anything in life, there's an exaggeration. Tea is generally weaker than coffee, right? If you brew tea like an English person, then you're going to get a really dark cup of tea, and it's the oxalate that's what's in tea, coffee, vitamin C even is a precursor for oxalate. That when you do it in a concentrated and a frequent manner, without hydration, with water, let's say, then that can lead to crystals of oxalate to come
Forming.
out in the urine.
Hmm. Dr. Hawkinson, did you
Yeah.
want to add anything about
No, I
kidney
mean, I
infections?
think that was all said.
We scared you off
correctly.
tea,
I
though.
would agree. Yeah. No, but I think there are dietary components, just as we heard, to help not necessarily give you these stones, but certainly increase your risk for those types of things.
Angela would like to know about prostate surgery and the problems men have with their bladder after prostate surgery. That's not always the case, just sometimes?
No.
Or what is the connection?
No, so that's a really good question, and
Yeah.
it kind of leads off from that other question about holding back.
Mm-hmm.
So when we deliberately hold back, you have to be really doing it a lot chronically, as we just said, right, to become a problem. But when a man gets older and his prostate starts becoming the problem independent of control, right, it starts becoming a blockage, then the bladder can get thickened, it can become hyperactive, meaning it can contract unexpectedly, gotta go kind of thing. And what happens if you keep doing that long enough and don't deal with the prostate, the bladder becomes dysfunctional. And the older a man gets, the more that becomes permanent. It doesn't get reversible. If you deal with the blockage and get rid of the prostate problem, most men will do okay, but some are left with still what we call irritative voiding symptoms and sudden stress, where their bladder has become, the pump, if you will, the bladder as a pump, becomes dysfunctional.
Jean has a question. Boy, this is a good question. Because my dad has Alzheimer's, and we've been told that make sure if you have someone in your family that has dementia or Alzheimer's, make them drink a lot of water because they could be more susceptible to UTIs. But I've wondered why. Why? And Jean would like to know, what is the link between dementia and UTIs?
So that's another very good question. There are several components to peeing. There's obviously the outlet, like a prostate or muscles. There's the pump, which is the bladder. There's the kidneys that have to make the urine. But then what we always forget, there's a neurological pathway involved, which is controlling all of the above. right? It's the control mechanism from brain to the spine to some of the what we call the micturition centers. And so when people have Alzheimer's and have cognitive issues, they're not always aware when they need to get up to pee. They're usually older, so it's a mixture of everything. So incontinence becomes greater, therefore, sometimes retention becomes greater. Same with multiple sclerosis and other conditions. But with dementia, unfortunately, they often lose some of that cognition of control of that pathway, and they do have sometimes hyperactive bladders, and then UTIs become a problem. They have catheters put in, they get straight cath. They have a number of different things that sometimes they live in, in depends, kind of diapers, if you will, and things just become a problem and spiral sometimes.
So you need to just keep an eye on that and make sure that you've got a good team around you to take care. I have a COVID question from Mary Ellen. And this is for Dr. Hawkinson. Mary Ellen writes, I just read that a new COVID-19 variant called Deltacron may be emerging.
Yeah.
That's nothing any of us want to hear right now.
No.
Dr. Hawkinson, what can you tell us about Deltacron?
Yeah, I don't know much about this, if it was a research article or if it was picked up by the news. Certainly have heard about it. It's not unusual, and it shouldn't be unexpected that we would find a variant or at least an isolate with similar properties between the two. We know you can be infected with more than one type even at the same time. We know there are other animal reservoirs out there that animals can get it as well, and so you can have these mixing and recombination events. At this point, again, seeing and knowing what we've known since the beginning and the original Wuhan isolate up till now and the other variants, I think we should really continue to take comfort in the fact that the vaccines we have continue to offer great protection against hospitalization, severe disease, and death. So that's why it's important to stay up to date with your vaccinations. But just very little bit I've heard about this, and just understand that this probably is not unexpected. We don't know throughout time how many other viruses have done this, including influenza, other cough and cold viruses. The thing is now is we actually have the science and the technology to easily identify these things. So right now it doesn't seem like it's a problem as far as causing any surges. It doesn't seem like it would be a problem for severity of disease. But again, I think it's still new, and there continues to be that surveillance out there and trying to learn and get more information. So if it does come up, we'll certainly be able to report on that. But right now, I wouldn't be too concerned. I would be more concerned just about staying up to date with your vaccinations.
The voice of reason,
Yeah.
Dr. Hawkinson.
Yeah.
I want to bring in all of our guests for our final thoughts now. Dr. Nangia, I want to start with you.
So like in sports, we always have to have world records, right? And I have mine.
Okay.
Oldest vasectomy, 76.
Really?
76. Got to give it to him.
Man.
And the youngest was 18, but I have been asked for 16-year-olds who are in ward of states who became sexually active, and that's very tricky ethically and legally, right? The longest time since vasectomy someone wanted a reversal, 41 years.
So they were fine for 41 years, and then
41
they were
years. You never know until
Wait, how old were they when they wanted the reversal then?
Well,
60s?
no, he was in his. Ironically, he was probably out 30, and he was 71 when he came in.
And wanted a reversal.
Mm-hmm. You
So he
never
wanted
know.
to be a dad again.
Autumn,
or for the first time.
autumn relationships.
Wow.
Wow.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I told you I live in a funny world.
It's a big world.
It's a big world out there.
Dr. Harrell, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think we hit several of them, but obviously first, let's enjoy this tournament. This is an awesome time of year as far as sports go, but also be safe. If you're traveling to, see your favorite team, make sure you know what those rules and regulations are when you get there, so your trip's not ruined and you have a good time. And I think really the last thing I try to say is, be mindful of those around you. We're all in different spots. With how this affects us and what these changes are in such a dramatically different world than what we've been living in. And so things like, wearing a mask on an airplane, as you mentioned, if and when that goes away, be cool with being the person on the plane with a mask, because it's your health and peer pressure can be powerful, but do the right thing and stay healthy and enjoy the tournament.
Dr. Hawkinson, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank our guests. Dr. Harrell's done such a good job stepping into some big shoes for Dr. McGee. He's done a good job of keeping our young people healthy there in Lawrence. He'll continue to do it. I think they're in very good hands. And Dr. Nangia, excellent physician and surgeon. I think he's offered a lot of good insight. We've had a lot of good, insightful questions today. Just understanding that things are not black and white, especially when we're talking about health and disease processes. There are multiple factors involved in a lot of these things. And so it's very difficult, I understand, for a lot of people to understand it's not just this or that, but it's a combination of different factors. And so I think he's done a good job of explaining all these answers here today. So again, on the last point continues to be, it was a very good question about the Deltacron, or this new isolate that they found. But I think, again, everybody should continue to take comfort that here in the United States, we have a vast supply of vaccine. We know the vaccines continue to protect us, so if you are not up to date, please go get up to date. If you haven't been vaccinated, there still is time. Please go get vaccinated this weekend.
And we're figuring out a way to live through this and just keep leading our lives. This isn't our first rodeo. So we're just going to take everything that we're learning from our amazing doctors and keep moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, this is a big weekend. We're going to spring forward this weekend, which means Sunday at 2 a.m., push the clocks ahead an hour when you go to bed on Saturday night. Yes, you'll lose an hour of sleep, but you're 1 hour closer to summer. So there's that.
Yeah, my parents always remind me to do that, but then I remind them that my iPhone does it on its own.
Yeah. So you zing them.
Most iPhones,
you zing your parents with that.
Most iPhones and cable boxes will all do it on
don't have
our
to
own.
think about it anymore.
But if you like the old school alarm clock, which I still hold my alarm clock sacred, experts say the time change is altering your sleep schedule, though. Even if it's just an hour, it can have an effect on your health more than you think. The loss of sleep can cause you feeling like you're sleep deprived, sleepiness. It can linger for even weeks in some people, weeks. So to minimize the effects, just make some gradual adjustments. Dr. Damian Stevens is a pulmonologist here at the health system.
We're basically getting jet lagged. The entire country is shifting for 1 hour going east with this daytime, because we're, quote, springing forward, and because springing forward, you're losing this hour of sleep. So it's just like you left last night from Kansas City and you woke up in New York.
If you think the time change is going to affect you, Dr. Stevens says that just try to go to bed a little bit earlier tomorrow night, maybe take a half hour nap if you can swing it during the day, help you get back on track. March 30th is National Doctors Day. It is a fantastic day to honor doctors for their dedications and contributions to our whole community. Here at the Medical News Network, of course, we think every day should be a Thank a Doctor or Thank a Healthcare Worker Day. And we know so many of you in the community want to send your thanks as well. So here's how you can thank a healthcare worker for their hard work. We would love to spotlight your messages of thanks. On your screen right now, there's a QR code, the email addresses and websites where you can send us those videos. It's all connected. Once you send those videos to us, we will put them on the air and share them with everyone. So we can't wait to see your messages. Thank you so much for being with us today. And remember, you can always catch our shows anytime on Facebook, YouTube, and now on Twitter. And on Monday, we've all heard about how COVID-19 is being found in deer. Now there's a new report that finds deer may be transferring that mutated virus right back to us. How this is happening, what you can do to keep your pets safe. That's coming up. We'll see you Monday at 8 a.m.